The fat lady hasn't sung yet, but the finishing line is now clearly in sight. And this is your e-Spurs podcast.
Come on, you Spurs! 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 Tottenham, Tottenham.
Hi everybody, welcome back to the e-Spurs podcast, your weekly fix of all things THFC. Why not give us a follow on Twitter or Instagram at @e_Spurs. Check out and like us on Facebook if you prefer. e-Spurs page, all one word on there. And we're also on Google+, YouTube, Pinterest and Tumblr, the lot. For links to all e-Spurs platforms, guys, just go to our website espurs.blogspot.co.uk. Tonight on the e-Spurs podcast, we'll look back at a point on Merseyside. I'll be putting your social media questions to the panel on all things THFC. We'll be announcing the winner of our latest shirt competition, and if all of that wasn't enough, we'll also squeeze in a preview of the game against Manchester United next weekend. But before all of that, let's introduce our hat-trick of Spurs fans ready to talk all things THFC. Tonight we're joined by Jason, Ricky and Ian. How you doing, fellas?
All right, mate. Thanks.
Well, thanks, Andy.
Yeah, very well, thanks, mate.
Great stuff, lads. Great to have you on, as always. Before we talk Tottenham, a few reminders for everybody. Don't forget that there's now 2 opportunities to catch the podcast each and every week. On Mondays, you can catch your usual e-Spurs podcast. And on Thursdays, don't miss our Extra Time show, which also features the e-Spurs Talking Point. And as we mentioned on the podcast last week, the fan phone is now back and ready to take your messages on all things THFC. This is our dedicated phone line where you can leave your thoughts on what you've heard on the podcast or anything Spurs related and have your message played back on the following week's podcast. So if you've got something you want to get off your chest, then give the e-Spurs fan phone a call. Leave your message on our answer phone system and we do the rest. The number for that, guys, if you want to have your say on the podcast tonight, is 07497 148049. If you're outside the UK, just drop the first 0, add a 44. The number becomes 447 497 148049. And as I say, we'll play the best of those back on next week's podcast. Finally, we've got some rather important business to attend to. Over the past month, you will know that we've been running our latest competition to win this season's away shirt via the e-Spurs Facebook and Twitter pages. We've had hundreds of entries, so thanks to everybody who took part in the competition, and we can now choose our winner. So the way we're going to do this tonight, guys, is Ian is sitting patiently waiting with 2 bits of paper in front of him, screwed up into tight little balls, I'm told, and those contain the words Facebook and Twitter, and he's going to draw those in just a moment. We then look down the list of everybody who shared and liked the post on Facebook and retweeted the post on Twitter. And depending on which of the choices Ian draws, we'll look down 63 places on that list. And that relates, of course, to the time of the Harry Kane goal yesterday. So if you're number 63 on the retweets or 63 on the Facebook's likes, you've got a Spurs shirt coming your way. So without further ado, Ian, if you could start the balls, please.
Okay, I'm gonna start by saying left or right, because I've got a piece of paper in my left and a piece of paper in my right. So left or right?
Go on the right. Go on the right.
Go on the right. Let's have the right hand.
On the right.
Okay. The home team. The piece of paper that I've got written on here actually says Twitter.
So if you are number 63 on our Twitter list of people who retweeted that post, you've got a Spurs shirt on its way to you. And Rick has been busily counting down the list of the Twitter entries. Rick, you can now reveal who's got a Spurs shirt coming their way.
Okay, so for Twitter, it is Emma Walters, based in Staffordshire.
So Emma Walters, well done to you. You got a Spurs shirt winging its way to you very, very shortly through the post. Congratulations to you, and thanks to everyone who took part in our Spurs shirt competition. As I say, we had hundreds of entries this month, and we'll be doing them no doubt again in the future. Great stuff, lads. Okay, on to the review of yesterday's game, and of course, 1-1 draw up at Anfield. We now know the result of today's game, the Leicester City game against Southampton. There were a lot of talk before about whether or not it was a good result, a point gained or 2 points lost, and that would really depend on the Leicester game. So, Jace, where do we stand?
Well, I think, in terms of the title race, it becomes obviously the 2 points dropped. But in terms of pushing on to cement that place in the top four and definitely in the top three. It was a point gained. I think, in fairness, if you look at it as a one-off game, if you go to Anfield and get a result, I don't think you can ever come away and complain too much. I thought we played first half. I thought they probably just about shaded it, and they certainly worked Lloris more than we worked Mignolet in that first half. But the second half, we controlled much of the game, and in the end, it looked like we might go on to nick it. But I thought overall, they had plenty of chances as well, and probably a draw was the right result on the day.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, fair point also. And as we spoke about earlier, there was so many standout performances in the Spurs shirt yesterday. It really did put a shift in all of them. Ricky, who stood out for you in the Spurs shirt?
I have to say, Moussa Dembele, probably one of the most, second half especially, one of the best performances I've seen in a Spurs shirt this season and for many seasons. He was absolutely phenomenal. The strength, the power he possesses when he's on the ball to drive us forward. I mean, I lost count yesterday of the amount of interceptions he made. Just his sheer physical presence on the ball cannot be underestimated. And it's amazing when you think back to the Dembele of, 6 months ago when he wasn't even a regular in the Tottenham side. So I'm so pleased that he signed a new contract, and I really hope he maintains his form because he's an absolute beast, a tank in that midfield. And he reminds me, I think we were talking just slightly off air with Ian, and Ian made a great point and said that he reminds us really, reminds me also of Yaya Toure in his pomp, because he was absolutely formidable. And he's just, for me, one of the first names on the team sheet, definitely.
Absolutely beast of a player, isn't he? And another one who stood out for me yesterday was Eriksen and Lloris in goal. And Ian, Lloris in the first half in particular, he certainly put in a shift, didn't he? Saved us a few times there.
Yeah, he's got that quiet, understated brilliance and that calm assurance behind the back four. I was at the game yesterday, and his first half performance was absolutely brilliant. It's sublime. How he kept out that bouncing shot from Lallana, only him and the law of physics can explain how that didn't go in. But no, he's been a real phenomenal player between the sticks. And I go back to Pat Jennings and think that he's the best keeper I think I've seen in a Spurs shirt ever. I think in definitely in the modern era. I loved Robinson to bits, but Hugo is something completely different. He's top drawer, really is.
Ian, any weaknesses to his game, do you think? I mean, there've been some questions occasionally, very occasionally. He's picking slightly, but there've been questions sometimes about his kicking. Any weaknesses in his game that you can see?
Sometimes I agree with you, Andy. Sometimes his distribution's poor, but I think that's probably his brain working quicker than his feet can adjust to, because I think he sees what he wants to do, and then sometimes the execution isn't quite spot on. But there have been other times where he's got it spot on, and he's set Rose or Walker on a run, or Trippier and Davis, depending on the fullback pairing. But that's the one weakness that I would say. But what I did think, he's added some strength to his game.
Yeah.
You look at that great save he makes at the end of the game at Man City away at the Etihad, and then some of the saves he's pulling out where he's being strong, and he's dominating his area. And no, I think the only minor weakness could be his distribution, but outside that, I think he's a top keeper.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly saved us more times than he's made any sorts of mistakes, isn't he? He's such an asset to have, quality goalkeeper. Jace, overall, 1-1, a fair reflection on the game?
Yeah, I think so. As I said, I thought they probably created slightly the better chances. Even the one late on that shot across our goal line, how that never actually ended up going in was a worry. And Coutinho gave us problems, I thought, in the game, got into spaces and looked a good little player. But as I say, I think going to Anfield, if you take the title race out of it, 1-1 was a decent enough result, and it was an excellent performance up there. But I suppose it's harsh because you can't take the title race out of it, and you say, well, we have to go there and win. That's perhaps the position that we've got ourselves into with Leicester winning, just constantly winning. But no, there was 1-1 was probably the right result over the course of the game. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been such a long time since we've got any sorts of results up there, isn't it? So, a point on the day, not a bad result at all. If you take it into context, I mean, it depends on Leicester's result, doesn't it? And as we know, they scraped out another 1-0 win today. Rick, the title race now swings heavily towards Leicester, doesn't it? 7 points now clear. Is that game over?
I mean, realistically now, it's gonna be it would have to be a monumental Spursy collapse, even by Tottenham's old standards, for Leicester to throw this away. But I do take some kind of solace or hope that I remember Liverpool back in 2015, 2014, they had 3 games left to play and were 5 points clear, and they still lost the title to City. So this Leicester side, though, I mean, having said that, showing I'm really showing some, I don't want to even call it character by these 1-0 wins, grinding them out. And as depressing as it is really being a Spurs fan, by the fact that it looks like we're going to finish above the likes of Arsenal, Liverpool, Chelsea, Man United, Man City, to be pipped by Leicester, a club that have spent little to next to nothing on resources, that's going to be hard to take. But I mean, it's one of those things, isn't it? I mean, we have to hope. There's still a glimmer of hope for us that there's still points to play and it's still mathematically possible that there's a chance we can still win it. But I mean, you've got to say Leicester at the moment, it's looking like it is theirs to lose now. So, I mean, the games will tell. I think, like we said, I spoke to again Jace off air, and our games coming up. I mean, they're not kind to us, the fixtures, are they? Chelsea away. I mean, United, the next one, we haven't beaten them since 2001. So, I mean, at home, that is. So we're going to need to win games that realistically, if you look at our fixtures compared to those, compared to Leicester's, they're favourable in Leicester's path. So it's looking tough, isn't it? It's looking tough, but we just got to keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they've got to lose now, I think, 3 of their games, haven't they? And I mean, you can't see them losing 3. Having said that, I watched them today and really didn't think I only saw the first half, but absolutely nothing that I saw there to suggest I was watching potential champions. That's for sure. They certainly grind a result out, but crikey, their football's nothing to write home about. That's for sure. They're very workmanlike. They're very efficient. They've got a strong defence, but yeah, is it? I mean, Ian, is it a sign of the weakness of the league? Do you think, or am I being unfair on Leicester?
A bit of both, Andy. I think. I think that we've often said about football, if you keep it simple, then and you play to your strengths, the 12 or 15 workmanlike players that you've got will all gel together and they'll get the results for you. And fair play to Leicester. That's what they've been doing. They each play to their strengths. They get a goal ahead. They've got 2 monumental centre backs, and they've got a system that they know inside out. I think that the league isn't the strongest, but then as the saying goes, you can only beat what's in front of you. Yeah. And on the basis of where we are now, I think Leicester are quite rightly at the top of the pile, and I think that but mathematically we can still catch them. But looking at it, I think that the leagues have had their opportunity. You've had Chelsea; they spent in the summer, and again in January, and you've had other teams strengthen across all areas. But I suppose it all depends on the team spirit and the ethic that you've got, and I think that's what's seen Leicester and Tottenham go to the top of the pile at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Agree completely. And Jace, the target now, if we're suggesting that the league's possibly a little bit too much now, target's got to be finishing above that lot down the road, isn't it?
Well, it would certainly be a disappointment if they end up going above us, and we'd all be saying the one year we were in a title race and it's our best ever Premier League season, we still can't finish above them. It would be a disappointment. But I think, it's finishing above them. It would be also nice to set our own Premier League points record, wouldn't it? To go through that 73 points or whatever. And I think, you look at the Manchester United game next week. I think if we beat Man United next week, we go 12 clear of them with only 18 points to play for. So, if we can win next week, that should pretty much guarantee us at least that top 4 finish. But we definitely want to finish above Woolwich at last. It's that horrible stat, isn't it? They're the only club we've never finished above. So it's definitely time to right that one.
St Woolwich Day. I think we'll have to rename the day. And I mean, Rick, fantastic. Let's think on the positive. Fantastic season, pretty much guaranteed Champions League season, and a bright, optimistic future to come. Potentially Champions League in our last season at the Lane.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing we've got to look at before the season started. I think if you said to any Tottenham fan, that with 7 games to go, pretty much Champions League football is nearly assured, I think we would have been absolutely stunned. So from that perspective, you've got to say it's been a fantastic season. And the likes of Ali, Dyer, Kane, Rose, Walker, Loris, Alderweireld, Wimmer, I can keep naming them. But, I mean, the players this season, they really have come of age, if you say, because they're so young still. And the greatest thing is that although this season it's a great opportunity to win the league, next season we're going to be even better, and the players are going to be even better for having this experience wherever we end up finishing. So there is still so much to look forward to, and if we can keep this squad together and just maybe tweak a couple of areas, like we said in January, bring in a new striker, maybe bring in another centre defensive midfielder along with Dyer, then we've got a fantastic squad. And it's not often we go into a summer saying that we just need to make a few tweaks, because really, if we can keep this squad together, keep the nucleus of it, because it's such a young squad, there's so much foundation to build on. I think, like Poch at the beginning, he has laid the foundations here for success, and we're not too far away, I don't believe, from trophies, from titles, if we can keep the squad together. And we're just going to hope and pray that Levy, if he is offered money for a player, with obviously the stadium looming, that he doesn't go in, because I don't think any player would want to leave Spurs at the moment, because there is so much good going on here. And the main part of it all for me, I think I've said many times on Twitter, is Pochettino. He is the one that has captured this squad and brought them together. So it's even more important, really, we keep hold of Poch. I know he's obviously on a long-term deal, but if we need to offer him a new deal to keep him for longer, then please let's do it. Let's get this guy in for the long term. Let's build a legacy like United had with Ferguson, like Arsenal have had with Wenger, where obviously now towards the end they're not too happy about it. But for us, really, we need to kind of invest in the squad that we've got now, put the money behind Pochettino, because with him as a manager, you can see the guy thinks game by game. Yesterday, I don't think I've seen us play that. We go to Anfield and play well, but some of the football yesterday, I mean, that's a Liverpool side managed by Jurgen Klopp, and Klopp hasn't even put his full ideas in yet. And we played some fantastic football yesterday, and that sometimes gets lost because of the magnitude of the game and what's riding on it, and the fact that you have to win. The fact of the matter is, Kane scored that goal. There was not any celebration from the players. It was literally get the ball, get it back up to kick off, and let's go for the winner. And to see that kind of mentality away at Anfield, a team managed by Jurgen Klopp, what more can you ask as a Spurs fan? How can you not love this Spurs side and every player that's in it? They care. It makes us want to even be more kind of supportive to them. So there is so much to look forward to as a Spurs fan, and long may this continue.
Great shout. And I mean, Kane again has been in the news this week, isn't he? Now the record Tottenham scorer in the Premier League, 22 this season. Fantastic season again. That one-hit wonder. Been brilliant, isn't he? And so many positives to take from this season. Just listening to you there, Rick, I'm just thinking to myself about what we're missing, what would take us to that next level. And the only thing I mean, watching the game yesterday, one of the pundits, I think, hit the nail on the head when they mentioned that we miss a game changer. So the likes of they're not easy to get, are they? But the likes of a Bale who can do something out of nothing. I mean, we've got Eriksen, haven't we? But we've constantly talked about Eriksen on the podcast, and we mentioned that he's maybe just that. He's fantastic. It's a great asset to have Eriksen in the side, but sometimes he just slips that level below a game changer, doesn't he? And that's what I think would certainly help us take us to the next level. I mean, if we are to move up, where do you see us needing to improve?
If you think about it for next season, if we are in the Champions League, then you're asking Dyer to commit to a lot of games by himself. So I think the news recently has linked this with Alex Witsel. I'm not going to say I know him that well, but he seems like an experienced central defensive midfielder. If he's anything like Dyer, then that would be fantastic. So that's one area for me we need to invest, and obviously up front. But the problem we've got, Andy, I think like we mentioned before, is because of how good Harry Kane is, 21 goals in his last 23, you're going to be asking a striker to come in and not necessarily be able to start every game. It's going to be very hard to bring in a top-class striker that's happy to not want to play every single game of football, and that's our conundrum we've got. I mean, for me personally, like I said, I think Berahino would tick our boxes and would tick every option. I'm over now that whole thing where he had that outburst. For me, he wanted to join Spurs, was denied an opportunity, and you look where West Brom are in the league, and with 7 games left, they've got absolutely nothing to play for. So I can fully understand a player throwing his toys out the pram, wanting to move on to a bigger club. I'd hope when he come to us, where we are now in terms of challenging for leagues and titles, that wouldn't happen at Spurs. So for me, really, the 2 key areas, central defensive midfielder and a top-class striker to go along with Harry Kane. But the problem is now you've got Kane has set that bar so high that the expectancy is going to be even higher now for the next striker coming in. But one man who's kind of been forgotten this season because of injury has been Clinton NG.
Yeah.
We haven't seen much of him, Andy. So we don't really know. I mean, he looks, in terms of pace, it looks raw. But we haven't seen enough of him really to kind of gain a judgment or verdict as to how good this kid could be. So possibly with a pre-season under him for next year, who knows what Poch's thinking is.
Yeah, it's a great shout. There's those names that we often forget about. He's been out a heck of a long time, hasn't he? So he's yet to come and fulfil his potential at Spurs, isn't he? So it'd be interesting to see how he steps up next season. Ian, would you agree? Are there any areas that you think we need to look at in particular?
I agree with the central defensive midfielder role. And as I said, that we were talking about this Witsel. He's another Belgian, and I'm just wondering whether he comes in and does a similar job for us as Edgar Davids did when he came in all those years ago.
Yeah,
provided a little bit of nous, a little bit of tactical acumen, a little bit of sort of ownership and belief around the team. Not that I think that's missing, but I think somebody like him takes us to that next level. And playing sort of devil's advocate about Harry Kane, I think we do need another world-class forward that pushes him even further. And I know I'm being really, really sort of picky, but I want my cake and I want to eat it. So I think that we get another striker in, it pushes Harry to be even better than he already is.
Yeah.
And who knows? It might get to the stage where we're playing Champions League on a Wednesday and a league match on the Saturday. We're going to need that quality in depth. I think we may also need another quality replacement, not replacement, but cover for Toby Alderweireld, because I've got fingers, toes, eyes, everything crossed that he stays fit for our running. It was worrying me no end that he'd had gastroenteritis at the international break. So I'm just wondering whether they're the 3 or 4 places that we perhaps need to look at.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where he goes in, where he moves in the transfer market in the summer, whether or not he sticks with you would think he'll go along the lines of the youth policy that they've got in place. But I also think, as you lads have pointed out there, we need to add some quality that can come in and perform straight away. So, a defensive midfielder that's already established and can come in there and rival our lads that are in there. And you would think a striker. I think I agree with Rick completely. The Berahino stuff now is, water under the bridge. Let's get him in. Let's get him, working with Kane and see what happens there. It's going to be really interesting to see how it all pans out. So we also, as you know, if you listen to the podcast on a regular basis, try to cover your questions that you kindly send into the e-Spurs podcast each and every week via our social media channels on Facebook and Twitter. And once again, you guys have done a great job in doing that. So let's put some to the lads. Let's put your questions to the e-Spurs team. First up this week is a question from the Spurs poet. Let's go to Jace first up on this one, Jace. He asks, with the title race now realistically looking over, would the panel be disappointed if we don't finish second?
I think that, for me personally, I think if second or third technically there's not much difference in terms of the prize that you get because both of them will be guaranteed Champions League places. I think but the way we have been, I think we deserve to finish second because to me we've definitely been amongst the two best teams in it, and it would certainly be a big blow if we ended up finishing below Arsenal. But come the start of the season, if somebody would have said top four, you'd have taken it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I suppose so. I think whilst we've been in the title race, we've never actually been top at any stage. So second's the highest we've been, and it seems now we've been in second for quite such a long time. I suppose, yeah, it probably would be a disappointment. But, the main thing now is to tie up those Champions League group places, not even fourth. And certainly, I think second or third, whichever now, we'll just take that.
Jace, if you're presuming, if we presume that we are looking to improve as a team each and every season, you're looking to better the previous season. What for Spurs is an improvement next season on this?
Well, I think, next year we'd certainly, I think, want to be challenging for the main honour again. I'm not so worried about everyone saying that Chelsea will go and spend big money next year and Manchester City will go and spend big money and they'll all be so much better because, like I said, I think the jobs that Conte will have to do at Chelsea and that Guardiola will do at Man City and maybe even whoever takes over at Manchester United. I think all three of those squads have underperformed this year because they're so poor, the squads. I think the rebuilding jobs there is 8-9 players in a lot of those cases. And so, yes, they can go and spend a lot of money, but it's not just the money you spend because we talked beforehand, didn't we? Pedro looked like he'd be an excellent signing for Chelsea this year. He's done absolutely nothing. And whilst Chelsea may well go and buy a world superstar, it may well be that they'll lose an Eden Hazard, who's a world superstar. And, Manchester City will be losing the likes of probably Yaya Toure, and they brought in Otamendi, but Otamendi hasn't looked anything this year. So I'm not so worried about those sides, finding an extra. I don't see those finding 15 extra points necessarily next year. I think they'll improve and they'll be better, but not necessarily in the way that everyone thinks they will be. So I think with that tweaking, there's no reason why. I'm not saying we will win the league next year, but there's no reason to think that we can't go into April still with the chance of winning the title again. And I certainly hope we will build on it.
Yeah, agree completely. And on to the next question of the night. This is from Sorja Chowdhury, and this is for you, Rick. He asked, Champions League looks all but confirmed. Keeping that in mind, who would you sign in the striker or defensive midfield role?
Okay, so for me personally, I think I said Berahino would be my preferred striking option. I think I've said on many occasions, young, pacey, English, ticks the kind of boxes Pochettino looks for as a player. So that would be my number one striker. From a central defensive midfield perspective, in terms of the players out there, I'm just trying to think of availability. I mean, Witzel's name keeps being mentioned. I haven't really seen too much of him, but all I can say, if we can get someone in the similar kind of mould as to an Eric Dyer as an alternative, that's really what we're after, because we want to see if we can kind of get the same balance that we have between Dyer and Ali. We haven't got that. Anyone else, in terms of another option, the Masons, the Bentalebs, that balance between Dyer and Ali that we've got is so fine. As you can see, England have taken that now, and they're probably going to use that as their central midfield partnership in the Euros. Yeah. We've got to try and find a way of striking a similar balance as an alternative, because next season with the Champions League nights, hopefully we have them, which is looking obviously confident now, we're going to try and find a balance where we're going to be able to play the Premier League and still try and, I would hope next season, go for the title again. So you're asking to try and have an assault on the Champions League, trying to have an assault on the Premier League, and also taking into account the cup competitions, which I hope next season, like we've been open for every season, they're taken just that bit more tad seriously in terms of the team selection. So again, it's hoping that you can find the right balance, and we're not asking to go and spend 60 million or 80 million. It shouldn't need that. It's going to need a couple of additions around maybe a 20 million or a 15 million pound mark. So Poch has got Mitchell. He's his eyes. I'm sure we're already casting our eye about in terms of the next young thing for us. It's going to probably be a young player that none of us probably were going to expect to come in. So Moussa Dembele also being another option maybe for the striker role. the Fulham forward who seems to be knocking the goals in now since his name was banded around in January. So it's going to be an interesting summer because it's not like other summers, like I've said previously, where we need to go all out and buy 4 or 5 players. We're looking really just for at maximum 2 or 3. So it's going to be interesting.
Certainly is. And that reminds me of you bring up a great point there, Rick. Reminds me of the question I was going to put to Jason there, which was, Jace, in terms of the cup competitions, do you think next season we'll finally start to see Tottenham under Pochettino start to take the cup competition seriously?
I would hope so, but in experience shows us that he didn't take them that much seriously at Southampton, and he hasn't done too much here. I think it will totally depend, a little bit like this year, where we are at that stage. I mean, if we're in the position that I'd like us to be in, I can't see him changing his thinking we've got to go and win the league or cement the place back in that top 3. And a lot of it will also depend, I think, what happens in the Champions League, because if we go into the knockout stages, that obviously then takes into February and March, when you'll be playing then the FA Cup games, and something purely has to give. So, if we got knocked out at the group stage, then there's no reason why you couldn't have a run, certainly at the FA Cup. But I think it totally depends how we do in that Europe, because it's a big bugbear for me, everyone that slates the Europa League. And I've always said the same negatives in the Europa League will apply in the Champions League. We still have the lack of preparation time. You still have 2 games in a week. You still have the focus being lost. So I think, it's very hard to compete on 3 fronts, particularly if you're back in a title race again.
And surely, Jace, a lot will depend on how good our youngsters are that we enter into these, because you would presume Pochettino is going to want to rotate. So it's all about the quality of the players that you rotate with.
Well, it certainly is. But if he tweaks the squad and we bring in the extra central defensive midfield player, and we bring in the second striker, then we certainly shouldn't be in a position where we're playing with Nasser Chadli as a striker in cup ties, because we've only got one striker to pick from. And as Ricky said, with Clinton and G coming back, I'm sure we'll definitely sign a striker. And with 1 or 2 other additions, I think Son will be a better player for having that first year in the Premier League and things. So, there'll certainly be, I think, stronger sides next year, but I think it will depend, where we are in the league. And if we're in the league title chase going into April, I think, most people will be saying, do we really want to be in the FA Cup again?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're interested in Spurs chat about the academy players, the younger lads coming through into the first team, don't miss our extra time podcast this week, which coincidentally is talking all about exactly that, the younger players coming into the Spurs team, whether or not they're currently good enough, how many will make the grade, and which ones are the best of the crop. That will all be featured in the Extra Time podcast this week, so don't miss that, guys. Last question of the night to Ian. This is from Lachlan Peters, Ian, and he asked, should Spurs sign Morgan Schneiderlin if he is up for sale?
I don't think... I'm going to say no. I don't think he'd be an upgrade on any of the players we've currently got in that position. I think there are better players out there, and I think we've mentioned one already tonight with Witsel, and there's a few others out there that we could use. I'm not sure. I think that particular boat has sailed. I think we'd have probably had him a season or 2 ago, but I don't get the impression that he's really setting the world alight at Old Trafford. If he was, then I think there'd be more of a clamour, around the social media platforms for us to take a look at him. So I'm not 100% certain on Mr. Schneiderlin, I'm afraid.
Yeah, he's just one of a few players, isn't he, that Mr. Van Gaal seems to have absolutely ruined this season. I mean, it's fair to say the likes of Juan Mata since he moved to United, Schneiderlin. I mean, the list is endless. The players that haven't performed for Man U this season, that shone last season. I mean, the press coverage over the Schneiderlin move last summer was endless, wasn't it? And now you look at and as you quite rightly say there, I don't think there'd be many. I mean, I'm sure there'd be takers for him, but I don't think there'd be too many teams desperate at the moment to get him into their side. That's for sure. And it's just one of the many stories of Man United's season at the moment. But But yeah, great shout. And thanks to everybody for sending in your questions this week, as always. And don't forget, if you want to send in a question for any of the e-Spurs team on the podcast each and every week, get in touch via our Twitter and Facebook. On Twitter at @e_Spurs, and on Facebook it's facebook.com/e-Spurs page, all one word, and leave us a question on there, and we'll read the best of those out on the podcast each and every week. Okay, so on to the final part of tonight's podcast, which is of course the preview for the forthcoming game against Manchester United at the Lane next weekend. Man United, of course, still fighting for a top 4 place, so they've still got plenty to fight for at the moment. And of course got a result today, didn't they? Scraped out a result against Everton. Anthony Martial getting the goal again. Jace, a lot has been said about this fixture in terms of what it means to Spurs, but do we go into this game as favourites, bearing in mind the season that United have had?
Oh, I think without a doubt we go into the game as favourites. Because, like I say, you look at it, we'll still be 9 points clear of them, and with a win to go 12. And I think there's still a lot of criticism about Manchester United overall. And as you say, I mean, they didn't look great today. So I think, it would be great to win it, wouldn't it? Because it's 2001 since we last beat them at White Hart Lane. And having had such a long time without being able to do it at Old Trafford and cracking that one, it's certainly time to beat them at White Hart Lane. Because not just is it the 14 years, I can't remember many times within that 14 years where we ever really looked like beating them. I suppose being 3-0 up at half time is perhaps the one that you should have seen through. But other than that, I think the only other time we really looked like we was going to do it was when I think Tevez got a 95th minute equaliser. Didn't he get a diving header from a corner or something?
Yeah.
And that's the only other time I can really think we've looked like beating them in that time. But I think we will bounce back from the draw. I fully expect us to win next week.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of great results up at Old Trafford, haven't we, last few seasons, and during their their transition period, shall we say? But other than that, it's been thin pickings, isn't it? Not too much to write home about. Remember, it's sort of in the 90s, was it a 2-1 win we got? At the later 4-1. I remember a 4-1 on Boxing Day, I think it was, but few and far between, aren't they? So it'd be great to get a win there. Rick, have Man United got anything really that at the moment, bearing in mind our form, that should worry us?
They've come off the back of a couple of victories, haven't they? So Man United are one of those sides. You don't know which Man United are going to turn up. They won away at Anfield in the Premier League, so they have got the capability of going away and winning games. It depends really on the team that turns up on the day. I mean, I still think if Spurs can play to the potential they've played this season, then we will win the game. We've proven this season that kind of the form window goes out. The records go out the window in terms of, the fact that we haven't won against them at home since 2001. That stat needs to go, really, doesn't it? If we're gonna have any chance of this title, we have to win at the weekend, regardless of whatever happens with Leicester. So these Tottenham players, they're not. For me, I don't think Spurs look like they're playing under pressure. Even yesterday, that didn't strike me as a team that bottled the game or felt like that we were playing under immense pressure. We played the game to the best of our ability and came away with a point against a good Liverpool side. And again, same for next week against United. I expect us to go out there, approach the game exactly the same as we have done the other 31 and try to go and win the game. And again, it will be packed White Hart Lane next week. There'll be a crowd behind them that will hopefully drive the players onto a win. And at White Hart Lane recently, we haven't done too bad there. I think only Arsenal has been the most recent game where we've dropped the points at the Lane. Apart from that, really, we've been very, very good at home. We need a fast start like we had against Bournemouth. If we can score early, it's going to make a lot of difference, because that just lifts the anxiety sometimes waiting for the goal. So if we can start the game early, get an early goal, because this United team, we've seen it before, when they do go 1 down, 2 down, they do kind of fall back and inevitably crumble. So if we can score early, I'm confident we can go and win next week, definitely.
It's going to be a great game, isn't it? Always are the traditional, one of the traditionally big fixtures of the English calendar anyway. So it's always a great game. And Ian, in terms of the lineup that we select, we saw Son come in this week. Lamela, we're told, had an injury sustained during training. Would you stick with Son in there, or would you bring Lamella back in, providing he's fit to play?
I think I'd bring Lamella back in. I just think that Lamella, he's the Spurs version of Marmite. You either love him or you don't. For me, I think when I've seen him, we are starting to see a really good player there. I think Son worked incredibly hard yesterday. He just seemed a little bit off the pace, and a year ago we were all talking about Lamella and he was trying too hard. I get the impression that Son's doing the same. I genuinely believe there's a really good footballer in Heung-min Son, and I think that we should persevere with him. But for a game of the magnitude of Man United next week, I go back to the Arsenal away game, and that changed when we took Lamella off, and I think there was a direct correlation between that and the fact that our left back on the day got exposed by the lack of the cover that was being provided by Lamella on that particular game. So I think Lamella's got to come back if he's fit, because I think that we're going to need to have that press in and that high intensity, and we're going to have to steamroll Man United, because I think that we need it's obvious we need the 3 points, but I think that Lamella in with our midfield just provides us with that extra little bit of combativeness that we need.
Yeah, and his work rate, he certainly puts in a shift, doesn't he? And that was my concern, I think, when Son was announced in the lineup. He's great technically going forward and got a great shot on him. But there's questions, I think, in terms of the work rate of the likes of Son and Chadley in particular. Fantastic players on their day, as I say, great going forward. But do they put in the shift that Lamella has been putting in this season, in particular going backwards and defending? Which, Lamella has been fantastic, hasn't he, this season in doing that.
But going back to the two players you mentioned yesterday, I think they both put in the effort. I saw a lot more from Chadley when he came on. Yeah. There was a lot more directness. He chased back. He was combativeness. He had that sort of, he went in for challenges. Son worked hard. But I think that, going back to what you're saying, I think Lamella just offers us something more in a bigger game.
Absolutely. Another bonus to come out of yesterday's game, of course, was that Dyer escaped any further suspension, which I think a lot of Spurs fans were praying for during the game. So that was another bonus. I think it expires, doesn't it, next week, provided he doesn't pick up any more yellows. So we'll all be waiting to see how that pans out. Fingers crossed. I can see there being goals in this one. I can see Spurs or United winning by a couple of goals. I think, on the day, I think we'll have the edge. I really do. We've said time and time again on here that, Spurs should go into the game as favourites, should go into the game confident. And I think despite Man United still fighting, because they're going to be, coming into the games fighting for their lives, fighting for fourth place still, I can see us running out, dare I say it, I can see us running out comfortable winners. I really do. I think we've got the quality to do them. It's going to be interesting. Let's go across the board, lads, and get a prediction on this one. John obviously isn't here this week, couldn't make it because of work commitments, but let's take it as a given that John says 6-1, and John will know what I mean out there if he's listening. Ian, you're first up this week. Prediction, please, mate.
2-1 Spurs. 2-1
Spurs. So close affair there. 2-1 to the Spurs. And Rick?
I'm going to go 3-1 Spurs.
3-1 Spurs. So slightly bigger margin. And Jace?
I'll go 2-0. The only thing we got to allow for is, De Gea is a fantastic keeper as well, isn't he? And one of your big bugbears, I think, this year, mate, has been that we haven't been clinical enough at times. Yeah. And certainly when you're up against a keeper like De Gea, we can't be a fool to waste 6 or 7 chances all the time because he's such a good goalkeeper. So we got to be a lot more clinical next week for sure. Yeah,
absolutely. And Kane's got a great chance now of getting that golden boot, isn't he? So I think that's enough reason, if any, to spur him on. I completely agree, though. I have said that many times, and I do think there's times when you watch games and you think, just, that 10% more of a clinical finish, clinical edge there, and we could have won by a few more goals here and there. But hey, listen, what a season! Been great, as has the podcast tonight. We thank everybody for listening. I hope you've enjoyed tonight's offering, and don't forget, guys, we really do need you to get in touch and get involved in the podcast each and every week. If you want to follow us on Twitter at @e_Spurs, and we're on Facebook, facebook.com/e-Spurs page, all one word. We'll be back after the Man United game next weekend, and don't forget to get in touch on the e-Spurs fan phone and have your say on the podcast this and every week. And also look out for our extra time episode, which will be out on Thursday, talking about the Spurs youngsters coming through the ranks and whether or not any of them are good enough to make the grade next season. So well worth a listen, that one. On behalf of Jason, Ricky, Ian and myself, thanks for listening, guys. Have a great week. And as always, come on you Spurs.